Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. So in this video, I'd like to talk about Casper, where it's at, what I believe it's doing, and where I believe it's headed next. So let's get started. So this is the first bull run structure that takes place on the Casper chart. Now, this pink fractal that I have on here comes from over here, right here in this green box. Now, if we zoom out, we can see that this green box that we were just looking at is only one structure within a series of many structures. So this is part of the macro structure. The Casper macro structure is a repetitive structure. Now, this is at the very beginning of the Casper chart. This part of the chart you cannot find on TradingView. I'm using CoinTrader Pro. It allows me to go back further back in time and on a very small time frame. Essentially, what comes before this green box is a bull run. Yes, a bull run. A decline and a sideways range-bound time that ends with a bounce, and then this little structure right here that we are in is the beginning part of the bull run. We see that same structure repeat overall, the macro structure. There's the bull run, there's the decline right here, there's the sideways range-bound time that ends with a bounce, and it repeats once again. This, of course, is to a much larger bull run structure, and it takes place the macro structure again. So this little part right here is this part right here. So after the peak, price retreats and it does this undulation right here. This is a series of waves. You can see one wave and a second wave there. And if we zoom out even further on a day candle, I was on an hour candle before. So this is that fractal we just looked at. After this comes the decline, and this decline ends with a bounce right here that we see. We actually see that bounce occur on this one too. The first one, this little tiny bounce, and on this one, it's a larger bounce right here. See it a bit clearer right there. After this bounce, price moves up, and then it retreats. It moves back up again. It kind of winds its way down, does a little wave right here before coming to a low point and moving back up into the next fractal. This fractal we can see takes place here. So after that bounce right here that takes place at the bottom of this crashing structure, it moves up. We even see that little wick right there. It moves back up again. So similar to the wick right here, it moves down, moves back up again. And then it has this second little wave that brings it to a point. So here is that second little wave before coming to a point and moving up into the next fractal. We see that happen again on the second iteration. So price comes crashing down, does that bounce before moving back up, and there is that wick right there. It moves down, moves back up again. There's that second wave before coming to a point, before moving up into the next fractal. The next fractal basically consists of a move up. It comes crashing back down and does this bowl type structure. Now this flat part, it's not really flat. There's waves in there, but it kind of moves sideways for the most part. And over here we see that same structure here where it moves up, it drops, kind of goes flat, moves back up again, creating a bowl structure. It then kind of winds its way to a point. In this case, it drops, whereas this time it just kind of winds its way down to a low instead of dropping to a low. Now over here, we see that fractal where it moves up again, it drops, kind of goes flat. This time we see those waves a bit clearer. It comes back up, creating this bowl type structure here. It then winds its way down to a point. And here it does that bounce. Just like in times past, it did a bounce, and it did a bounce over here before moving into that green box, and that is where we currently are on today's chart. So here is that bounce on today's chart, and here is the green box on today's chart. Now, what is this fractal? So this pink fractal right here is from over here. So here's that first green box. Now, we examined this structure in the last video. So there's three parts to it. There's this wave right here, this what I call the first wave. There's this part right here, which I call the second wave. And then there's this part right here, which I call the third wave. And this, I consider it part of the third wave. It's the final little bounce on that third wave before price begins to move up aggressively into the next bull run structure. Now, this is that fractal that we just looked at, copy and pasted onto today's chart. Here is that first part of the structure, the first wave where it moves up. It then moves up more aggressively into the second wave and into the third wave where it comes to a peak, and then it comes crashing down. So as you can see, we are now working on the final part, the final bounce of the third wave. It is moving along quite nicely. In fact, there is some little deviations here with this. Basically, it's not even really a deviation. This is actually just a bounce. It was a very low bounce. This one was a little more exaggerated. And over here, we see the same bounce that should be taking place. Now, when a fractal repeats, the timing, the height, and the depth, those things are always going to be original to the new iteration of that fractal. So the basic idea copies over from the original fractal, but the timing, the height, and the depth, those will remain unique or original to the new iteration of that structure. So here we see price moving down, and so I would expect this to continue to move down. Now look at this. It could potentially go lower than what it does over here. That is something you should be prepared for, a possible low beyond this low. If it does do that, do not worry, it will move up again. So we just examined this little green box here. What I'd like to do is examine this one right here. So this one played out on a much larger scale. It also took a lot longer to form. So the more time it takes, the more detail you usually get. So in the past, I've showed you this structure. I've copied it and pasted it onto today's chart. And there's an important thing that I'd like to update you on this structure. But before I get to that, here is wave 1, which we see right here. It then moves up into wave 2 and pulls back. See that here it moves up into wave 2 and then it pulls back. It then moves up higher in wave 3, comes to a peak, and then it pulls back. Just like we see here where it moves up, comes to a peak above wave 2, and then it pulls back. Now here is where I believe I have been stretching this out incorrectly. There was no way to tell until this structure had developed further. Now with 2020 hindsight, I can go back and say, hey, I believe I was drawing this incorrectly. I believe this played out on a much larger scale, and it was more like this. And then this is much smaller. It is this right here, and this is this part right here. So let me jump back to the original one and show you why I believe that this is the more accurate way to use this fractal on today's chart. Okay, so the differences pertain only to the third wave. So price moves up, it comes to a peak, it then pulls back and does this dip right here. So price moves up, comes to a peak, it then pulls back, comes to a dip, and this dip is right here. After this dip, it moves back up and does another dip right here. So after this dip, it moves up and comes to another dip right here. And then lastly, it does this bounce right here and this little part of the bounce, which would be this little bounce right here and this part of the bounce. Now, if we examine this part over here, we see that this fractal does not call for a move down. It is moving down. So this could also indicate that it could move down, but maybe not that much, at least not as much as this fractal indicates. I'm going to show you another fractal using recent history that could indicate that it will drop similar to this. Okay, so I'm over here on TradingView. Now, if we take this most recent structure right here, which was the bounce before the first bull run structure, and copy and paste it over here, well, as you can see, it's a good match. Now, this is a normal thing for recent history to be a good guide for what has taken place. The thing you should be aware of is it can be an excellent guide, but the current chart can change on a moment's notice and start doing something different. So it has a shelf life. While it lasts, it's a good guide. So be prepared for it to deviate from this. But if it continues to follow, we have a drop here. And as you can see, it has been calling for a 2 bounce thing, just like this structure is calling for. So this structure here underscores what this fractal is telling us. So I would be prepared for that, for a potentially deeper decline than even the low right here. But after it bottoms out and does its thing, it comes to a completion, price will begin to move up. As we see in this first green box over here, it begins to aggressively move up. Now it has this correction that could take place. It's not in all of them, but it is here and in the next one. So this pullback takes place before it really moves up much more aggressively into the next bull run structure. Now this bull run structure, you think this one was trying with that big pullback? If it does something like this, you need to prepare yourself for these massive pullbacks, because that is the name of the game with the Casper bull runs. If you thought this was bad, be prepared for this one. So once it really starts moving up, it has potential to take back almost all of it. Now, if we're to use the second structure that we have been following, this one is a little kinder. It does still have that little correction before going into the next bull run structure, which is over here. So if we follow something similar to this, it may not pull back as aggressively, but we should still expect a substantial pullback. Look how high this wick goes. It pulls back, and it may not be as much as the other one, but it still is a lot. So this is something to be aware of. We will have a substantial pullback, and like I said, it's just part and parcel. It's the name of the game. It's par of the course for the Casper bull run structure. So whether it pulls back just a little or whether it declines a lot, after this comes the exciting part where price begins to move up aggressively, and this part will make us believe we are in a bull run. But this is the opening structure. This is the beginning part of the bull run. It's not an impressive shock and awe move, but it is the opening act of it. Well, folks, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. But if you did enjoy this type of technical analysis and you would like to see more of it and you're not a subscriber yet, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I will be continuing to follow this structure. And by the way, if you would like to know more about the bull run structure, I have done a deep dive on my Patreon page. That is patreon.com/thecharthistorian. In here, I have done a series of videos that deep dives into the Casper bull run. You will have a good understanding of the Casper bull run watching this series. I also have a Discord that has a channel on it where we discuss Casper. I'm active on that Discord. So if this is something you find interesting and you want to check it out, I welcome you to check it out. It's a $5 a month subscription fee. I believe it offers value. And especially since we are in the bull run structure, knowing what is coming down the pike is a valuable thing. Well, folks, I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.